What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another 60 feet 6 inches, your fantasy baseball home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me once again, it's Ben Rolfe. What's up, Ben?
Not much, Kyle. A long day at work. I'm recording this well past my bedtime, so you'll have to excuse me if I make any slips of the mind tonight. But never miss a chance to talk fantasy baseball. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm taking advantage of this President's Day weekend to get an extra podcast in for you guys. And Ben, this is great for me. I mean, it's the middle of the day. It's 12:30. I've been awake. I had my coffee. I'm ready to go. I'm trying to bounce up bright and early, and so we can time this up. But we got a lot to get into. We're going to talk third base today. We're going to try and dive into some of our favorite players at the position, some of the top options, all that. But before we do that, Ben, I want to talk a couple quick things. Eric Hosmer is a San Diego Padre. I guess kind of what was your instant reaction when you saw the news?
I was really shocked that that's where he signed. I mean, it doesn't seem like the ideal location for him, but their lineup's getting better. They're bringing it back up now. It's not quite the sort of dumpster fire that it felt like it was last year. I feel like there's at least some bright sides there with Margot. My initial concern was worried for Will Myers because it's been a while since he's played the outfield, and my concern was that this was going to be them moving Myers or perhaps even like seeing limited playing time for him, and I do worry a little bit. The only thing I wonder there is they're not confident in Chase Headley. I wonder if Will Myers may eventually end up as their third baseman, which would be an interesting way to go. But be good to see him get dual eligibility. And Hosmer, I think he can be relatively successful. It's going to be no more or no less than what he was in Kansas City. Really, I think we've seen what he can do on a bad team, and it's not bad and it's not great. So he's going to sit right around the top 10 somewhere like that, but at the position. But it's not exciting and it's not sexy. I'd have if he'd gone to somewhere like Boston, you could make the case for him as a top 8 kind of first baseman, but it's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the news, like 8 years, 144 million. If I set the over under at 4.5 years, the Padres, would you take the over or the under?
Probably the over. They've got a lot of good prospects there. I think they are serious about it. I think he's got an opt out after 5, I believe. So
Yeah.
most of the contract is front loaded, and actually that might work for the Padres because they're going to front load a lot of the contract, and then sort of 3 years down the line, they're hoping that a lot of these prospects will be coming through. They'll need to pay guys like Myers and some of the other guys around that infield, and
Yeah.
hopefully by then they might have some starting pitching as well.
Yeah, though I don't know. I feel like this is one of those signings that in like 3 years we're going to be talking about how terrible it is and how they're going to be trying to get out from under it. We'll see. I think he's a fine player. I think it's a decent. Like let's play a quick little this guy or that guy. Would you rather have Justin Bohr in Miami or Eric Hosmer?
It would be Eric Hosmer for me there.
Matt Carpenter or Eric Hosmer?
I'm reasonably low on carpet, and so it's still Hosmer for me.
Eric Carpenter or Eric Hosmer or Greg Bird, who we both really like.
See, this is where it gets interesting
Yeah.
with Greg Bird because Greg Bird's got that upside to be like a top 5 kind of guy. If he gets the average in line, he's got the power to be a top 5 guy, and he's in a lineup to be a top 5 guy. So Hosmer, I don't see him having that upside. So it depends what I'm looking for. If I've gone heavy on power early on, it's Hosmer because it's safe. But if I'm looking for a bit of upside, I'm going to go Bird.
Yeah, I think I'm 100% with you there. Hosmer's in that kind of 15 to 20 range. I think for me, he's in with the Trey Mancinis, the Matt Carpenters, probably after those guys, to be honest. I would rather have him than Brandon Belt, but Brandon Belt's terrible. Joey Gallo would be interesting. I just think if you're looking for that 40 plus home run upside, Gallo's definitely the guy. But then the averages could be a killer. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not ecstatic. The one thing I did think was kind of interesting was this might mean are talking about moving Hunter Renfro, and if he ends up in a situation, I mean, he's still a guy I really like. I know Atlanta was supposedly interested in him, so if Renfro goes to the Braves and hits in that park with that lineup, that could be fun. That could be a guy that I'd be more interested in. I don't know. Hosmer, I'm not gonna lose my sleep over if I don't end up with any shares of him. I can tell you that.
No, he's a guy I've never gone chasing, and he's a guy I won't start chasing now. Points league, I think, a little bit more value than Roto. I
Mm.
think him and Carpenter both, and Santana have a little bit more value in that format just because they're more all-round kind of players. But Roto, I think I'd probably rather be shooting for the upside than Hosmer. But he'll fluctuate anywhere from about 10th in my rankings through to 20, depending on what I think of the other guys. Pretty much day to day, I feel like he could be a guy if I want safety. I take as like the 11th or 12th overall guy off the ball. But if I'm looking for a bit of upside, he'll fall down into the 18, 19 kind of thing.
Yeah, nope. I'm totally agreeing with you. And our rankings will be up soon. Ben's already got his early season rankings; those will be adjusted, kind of as all these guys sign and we find a home for everybody. Then, we'll definitely have rankings on the site for you guys to check out before you do your draft. So the other kind of interesting piece of news is CJ Cron was the odd man out in Anaheim, which makes sense, and now he is headed to Tampa Bay. But Tampa Bay DFA'd Corey Dickerson. So Ben, I guess if in terms of fantasy production, does CJ Cron, now that he should, have an everyday job, become somebody that's a little more interesting to you? And Corey Dickerson was the guy that was actually pretty solid that is now just not on a team. So, kind of what are you doing with these two guys?
Yeah, it's really interesting because Corey Dixon was kind of the guy that came out of nowhere last year to be a real fantasy star. Whereas I feel like CJ Crone, he's never had the full opportunity to do it. I mean, the most amount of plate appearances he's ever had is 445, but in that year he only had 16 home runs. I really feel like even with full playing time in Tampa Bay, you're looking at 20, 25 home runs. He might be able to break out and get to 30, but it's not exciting. The average isn't great. Honestly, I'd have rather had Corey Dickerson. I'm now just hoping that Corey Dickerson catches on somewhere. Like you could almost see someone like the Red Sox taking a punt. Like he'd be a cheap JD Martinez for them.
Yeah, or maybe Kansas City, who's going to be needing to replace a lot of players. Could definitely look at potentially him as a power option. But let's talk third base, Ben, because there's a lot to get into. I think there's actually a lot of names in terms of depth that make a lot of sense. So we'll give you guys our rankings along with the consensus. So for the consensus at third base, this is all via Fantasy Pros. It's Nolan Arenado, Chris Bryant, Manny Machado, Josh Donaldson, Jose Ramirez, Anthony Rendon, Alex Bregman, Justin Turner, Travis Shaw, Adrian Beltre. I guess Ben, what's your top 10? And give me like a name that kind of you're surprised wasn't included in the consensus that you're definitely in on.
So my top 10 is Arenado. I have Machado above Bryant, and that mainly comes down to future shortstop eligibility. Then I have Bryant at 3, Ramirez at 4, Donaldson at 5. I have Turner at 6, Bregman at 7. Then my surprise guy is Longoria, and then I've got Rendon and Travis Shaw. So Longoria was the guy that really stood out to me that he wasn't there. I mean, I think the trouble is with Longoria, a lot of his value comes from playing regularly, and people underestimate what he gives you.
Mm-hmm.
And last year wasn't a good year. I mean, he only hit 20 home runs. His average slipped to 261. And he only had a combined, I'm just doing the maths in my head, a combined 157 runs and RBI, which is nothing special. But I actually think the San Francisco lineup is much improved this year compared to what it was last year, compared to what Longoria is kind of used to at this stage of his career. I don't think it's great by any means, but it's better that it's not something you're gonna turn your nose up at. So
Yeah.
I think he can be reasonably successful. The difference in his fantasy value, I think he's going to hit about 25 home runs. I think he's going to hit about 268, 269, somewhere in that region, somewhere in that sort of 270 region. He's going to he's always offered you 2 or 3 steals generally, apart from the odd year where he's had 0. And it all comes down to runs and RBI. If he can put up a combined 180, which I know you think is a stretch, then he's going to be close to that top 5 or 6. If he only puts up a combined 150, he's going to struggle to make the top 10. I'm just changing the numbers as we talk, and I can see how that affects things. If you put say 90 and 90 in, he sits right up alongside Donaldson. If you swap that down to 75 and 75, the numbers bring him right down below Adrian Beltre and Jake Lamb and guys like that.
Yeah.
So it's all going to come down to runs and RBI opportunity. It really is. But I think that lineup's going to surprise a few people. I think 25 home runs is easily possible. I think he's going to end the season a top 10 third baseman, but chances are it will be just based on games played. I think he'll get close to that 160 mark again, and I think the Giants will put up a solid offense. It's just whether I think their pitching can stick with them this year.
Yeah. For me, let's see here. Longoria comes in at 15. I feel pretty good about that. For example, my top 10 is Arenado, Bryant, Jose Ramirez, Josh Donaldson. Manny Machado comes in at 5. Justin Turner, Alex Bregman, Travis Shaw, Beltre, and Rendon. So there's my top 10. Longoria's at 15. Longoria, it's funny because I feel like there was kind of a little narrative that he didn't play a lot of games, but especially due to the 2011 and then the 2012 season where he burned a lot of owners. But he's been 160 or more 5 of the last 6 years, and the 1 year he didn't play 160 games, which was last year. He played 156, and he still had 677 plate appearances. So, yeah, I mean, he'll definitely, like, if you want safety and reliability, he'll play every day. I think 20-ish, 22 home runs with maybe 85 RBIs and 70 runs scored. It feels about right. If he can get his average closer to the 270 than the 260, 250 that he's kind of sprinkled in, I think he could be a solid option. I think he'll be a guy that I'll definitely be interested in for middle infield. But I don't know that I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that I get him.
So I just put your numbers into my projections, and he comes out pretty much dead on 15.
Yeah.
So that's the difference here. I'm probably a little bit aggressive with my projections at that kind of 170, 180 mark. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you look at the guys around him, and he's he's almost 0.05 lower on my rotor score per game ranking that I give him. So even with my good projections, he's lower per game. So he needs to play the 160 games to give you that value. But I feel confident, based like what you've just said, that he can do that. And I mean, if we just look at the plate appearances, 693, 700, 670, 685, 677. The lowest there is 670. That's incredibly impressive, and that's great durability from a man who has gone through his into his early 30s now. We've seen these guys be able to play. We've seen Beltre defy age and keep doing it. And we also know Longoria is capable of the big explosive year. 2016, he hit 36 home runs, and then he hit 32 in 2013. So we know he's still got the power there. And I don't think San Francisco is the place to unleash that power, but I don't think 25 plus home runs is out of the question. And like I say, I think he can get the RBIs. It depends what you need. I feel like, again, it's going to be a safety versus risk kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting though because I think there will be opportunities to grab Longoria. I mean, he's currently the 20th rated third baseman on Fantasy Pros. So if you can get that kind of value, like I think he's definitely gonna be a guy that, like, I'd rather have him than Joey Gallo, than Nick Castellanos, than Matt Carpenter, okay. And these are all guys that are ranked above him. So I think there's going to be opportunity to kind of gain some value, and he could be a guy that actually makes a ton of sense. Let's talk about Josh Donaldson. I think he's a guy that, I mean, this is a guy that we were debating how high he should go, whether he should be, a top 3 pick, a top 4 pick last season. Obviously, only played 113 games, didn't even have 500 plate appearances. That kind of hurts his value. I guess, are you in on Josh Donaldson kind of rebounding and being the guy that was in the MVP discussion past couple of years, or do you think he's kind of moved on from that player and kind of on to the second phase of his career?
I think part of the problem is that the offense around him is not as good. Mm-hmm. So I think runs and RBI opportunities are going to be limited. I think I actually have more concern about his runs and RBIs than I do about Longoria's, to be honest, because I just kind of think that lineup can be weak depending on injuries. That's the thing. If they get everybody healthy and out there, it looks lovely with Tulo and all those guys. But if Tulo gets injured, if is Russell Martin still in Toronto? If Russell Martin flails a bit, if Justin Smoke's not who we think he's not who he was last year, all of a sudden it looks ropey for Josh Donaldson. The positive is he played 113 games last year, 496 plate appearances, and he hit 33 home runs.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
So I feel like 35. If he plays 120 plus, I feel like 35 is his base, and I think he can get that average back up to sort of that let's say that 280 kind of range, and that's where it's going to come down to. If he can get it towards the 285, 290, then he's going to challenge that top 4 or 5. If he's only hitting 275 and he's struggling with his runs and RBI, you're going to be looking at a guy that's going to fall 8, 9. So
Yeah.
he's probably a guy I'm gonna steer clear of in most drafts. It's all just going to depend on his value. If
Yeah.
he's going off the board as my 8th guy, I'll take him. But if I can get Travis Shaw, those kind of guys, a few rounds later, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't disagree more. I think Josh Donaldson's severely underrated. If you kind of project out what he would have done last year, he would have hit close to his 40 home runs. He would have the run total is definitely going to be down. He like in that lineup, especially when they're not healthy, that's going to be a problem. But I still think 35 to 40 home runs with close to 100 RBIs is definitely in the cards for him. 270, 280. Um, he's gonna be a guy that I'm gonna be really excited to own, and I think knowing that I can get him, several rounds later than I got him last year, or would have had to take him last year, is a nice value. And I think, people always remember the 1 year prior, and I kind of like to go back a few years and be like, well, why was this guy so popular? Why do we like him so much? And what's really changed? And man, I think I have Donaldson fourth, and I might have to move him up. I mean, I don't know that I could take him over Arenado or Bryant, but the third overall slot, I'd be really happy to take him there.
I couldn't push him up over Machado just simply because of that shortstop third base eligibility,
Hmm.
that ability to go from the middle infield to the corner infield is so huge for me, and we had a lot of debates about that last year. But I see what you're saying. I'm sat here saying how Longoria is going to be great because Longoria is played 160 games the last few years, and Donaldson played 155 plus 4 of the last 5 years, and
Yep.
obviously last year being the anomaly. I do just look at him as a guy that is feasted in that ballpark, and I don't think the home runs are going to drop off. But the difference is for me is that you can get Longoria, the 15th guy off the board. I feel like even the 4th or 5th, it's a risk whether Donaldson can return that kind of value. I feel like if you get Longoria 10th off the board, I don't know how he can fail you particularly because I don't see that being an issue with Donaldson. I worry if you take him the 4th or 5th third baseman, he could fail you. Unfortunately, we don't have ADP really right now from
Yeah.
many of the major sites. Most of the sites that are churning out results at the moment do much deeper drafts than the average sort of fantasy player plays in. So they do 15-team drafts, and I would say most people play in 10 or 12-team leagues. So we're staying away from ADP at the moment. If it shakes out that Donaldson is going, I don't know, let's say 3 or 4 rounds after the Arenado, Machado, Bryant, Ramirez group, say they're all going in the first 3 rounds, and you can get Donaldson in the 6th or 7th round, then I'd take him. But my worry is that Donaldson's going to get sucked into that third, fourth round conversation, and then I'd rather have somebody like a Travis Shaw, who I think you can get about the 80, 90th pick overall. So you're looking around 7 or 8, and that's the difference for me. It's I think I can get someone I feel more confident about in the third or fourth round, or I can get it's likely to be a pitcher for me. That's the problem here. Is Donaldson, where he's coming off the board, is going to come up with my second pitcher, and that's why I'm going to end up not getting Donaldson.
Yeah, I'm looking at the labor draft that we discussed on the last podcast. If you missed that, definitely go back and check that out. We broke down the labor draft and we talked to you Darvish to the Cubs and a bunch of other really good stuff. But Donaldson went as in the second round, but what was that? 15, like 28. So top 30 player. Like I'd be
Yeah.
really if I can get him if I get him at that like 2-3 turn, like I'd be pretty happy with that.
See, I'd want to be in the late three and into the fourth, and that isn't
Yeah.
going to happen. So that's where we differ here. I just don't believe in him that high. I'd rather get my second pitcher than,
Yeah. So you're
or maybe
thinking
my first pitcher.
closer to top 40 than say top 30.
Yeah, closer to
Yeah.
top 40, right around there.
Okay. Let's talk about Manny Machado because this is a guy that, like, I think people have kind of cooled on. I know he had that 20 steal season, but I don't know if that's coming back. And if that's not coming back, is this guy really somebody that should be challenging for top 2, top 3, top 4 spot at the position?
Yeah, I I don't know. I think the power can keep him there if that makes sense. I
Hmm.
think last year he hit 18 home runs in the first half, 15 in the second half, so 33 home runs. I think he can be a 30 home run guy. And I think he is going to play in a lineup where there's always going to be the ability to get runs and RBI. That lineup is weak, but they play in a park which highlights their skills. And so I think he's got that ability. It's also just the potential that he can steal, if that kind of makes sense. Like, I would take 9 steals from my third baseman. I really would.
Oh
So
yeah.
if you project that he's going to be even better, if you project him to improve this year and get back towards that 35, 37 home runs, and he's going to give you 5 to 10 steals, yes, 100%. But you're right. If he gives you a duck at steals, then we've got a problem. The thing is, I believe, is he in the last year of his contract? He's in the last year of his contract. So he is
Yeah.
playing for a new contract. And is that going to lead to more steals? That's my thing. The reason people have called on him so much this year is because he was just so hit or miss last year. Like, you run through his month to month kind of numbers, and I'm just going to run through his averages here: 224, 191, 242. That's May to June. That's horrific. Then he went July, August, 327, 341. And then September, October, he's back at 211 again. So he was just so hit or miss last year. That's what's really worrying people, I think, going into this season. And if you break it down first half and second half, it's 230, 290. So it does look better, but you don't want your second round pick hitting 230 in the first half of the year.
Yeah.
That sinks you. It doesn't matter what he does in the second half of the year, then you are chasing the game at that point, and you're probably making rash decisions to try and chase the game. And he sunk you so much. I understand why people say don't chase batting average, because somebody like Machado can just randomly go and do what he did last year with batting average, and there's no point you having all these great batting average guys if they're all just going to slump.
Yeah.
But you can't recover from their 230 batting average from your number two overall, from your number two pick.
Right. And see and that's kind of my thing. Is like I feel comfortable penciling in home runs for him in the mid 30s. But the average, I mean, 278, 286, 294. Okay, it looks like he's progressing. Oh, and then he throws a 259. So is he going to be a guy that hits closer to 260, or is he going to be a guy that hits closer to 290? I mean, that's a wild swing. And if I know I can get 7 to 12 steals out of him, I'd feel much better about kind of everything else. But at the same time, if we get a goose egg or a two, like he had every other even year, who knows? Like I don't know what I'm gonna get, and that kind of unpredictability makes it hard, especially like you mentioned, where I'm gonna have to take him when I'm trying to kind of figure out my team and pencil in. His potential and kind of, okay, how many home runs do I have? How many steals do I have? Where do I need to go with my next pick? If I don't know what I'm getting from him, how do I do that?
I agree with you. It's very hard, but I think what you've got to look at is I'm looking through his numbers. When I do this, I look through everything and I try to find a reason to explain it. And the only thing I can find that explains this lower average is a big BABIP drop, because he walked plenty last year. In terms of, he actually walked more last year than he did in 2016. He struck out less last year than he did in 2016, but his BABIP dropped from 310 to 265. Now, in his career, he's always been a 290 plus BABIP guy. If you see those 25 to 30 points of BABIP come back, I think you see that 30 points of average come back. I know you can't quite do it that exact way, but that is the only number that seems low for him, and that seems fluky to me. The only thing I can see that kind of plays into that a fraction is his line drive rate dropped 5% and his ground ball rate went up 5%. And I feel like that's probably something he's going to try and adjust this year. It might be the way people were pitching to him. But I think we see that average come back. I would feel quite happy penciling in a sort of a 285 average. I don't think I'd go as far as to pencil in 290, 295 like we've seen from him in the past. But I would pencil in a 280, 285 average. I think you can pencil in around 35 home runs. And runs and RBI, I think he'll do better than he did last year. I think he'll be right around the 200 combined. I feel fairly confident with him, if not as my number two, as my number three. And I would definitely be taking him over Donaldson.
Yeah, see, I'd much rather have Donaldson, but I guess that's what makes drafts fun. We'll get to kind of pick our poison and see where we end up. Speaking of picking your poison, who do you trust more to bounce to kind of repeat what they did last year? Travis Shaw or Anthony Rendon?
See, it's really tough because I look at what Anthony Rendon did last year, and he jumped 30 points in average,
Mm-hmm.
but you it was all in the strikeout rate, and he'd always been kind of a career. Well, early on he was sort of 15%, and then he jumped up to close to 20%, and now he's dropped back down to his lowest of his career. And I think that normalizes back towards 15%. I think we see the BABIP go down a fraction closer, but that's not out of whack his BABIP at all. I just think we see that average drop, and if we see that average drop, I'm concerned a little bit. So I'm going to say Travis Shaw just simply because I think what we're seeing from Travis Shaw is a move to a ballpark that suits him and a move to a style that suits him. That swing for the fences style, I really think, is his kind of thing. He also cut his K rate and upped his BABIP, and therefore brought in 30 points extra of batting average. But I see the home run staying. It's hard again because he doubled everything last year. But I really think that is a move. That is a move of teams, a move of park. I think 30 home runs, 5 steals. That's the kind of thing you expect. That's the only bit for him I don't believe in is the 5 steals. That's the only bit that concerns me a little bit is the difference between those 5 and 10 steals.
Yeah, I guess my thinking is if I can tell you that one guy is going to guarantee give you, say, 27 homers, 90, high 90s RBI, um, who do you trust to do that more? And I guess you could say Shaw, but I kind of like Rendon. And the thing I also like about Rendon is if his batting average kind of falls back a little bit, he's hitting say he drops down to 280 and he hits you 26 home runs and 90 RBIs or whatever. If Travis Shaw's average drops, we could be talking about a guy who's closer to 250 than 290. So I guess do you feel comfortable enough in to the rest of his numbers where if his average falls off a little bit and he's hitting say 260 that you'd be okay with that?
Yeah, so I'm just playing with the numbers here, and I'm saying that I can't project Rendon for much more. Let's say than last year, he's going to match 25 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
If Rendon hits 25 home runs, 90 RBI, and let's say 80 runs,
Sure.
and hits 280,
Yeah.
he is going to finish up there with Bregman. But I feel like that's a perfect storm. For all of that to happen. Whereas for Shaw, I feel like if he hits 260 with, let's say, 81 or 80, 85, that kind of number with 28 home runs, he is going to drop down into that like level with. He's going to drop closer to Beltray. He's going to be like down below probably what a full season Sano will be, and that's you're right. That is the concern. But if you were to say to me who's going to hit you 27 home runs, I'd say Shaw. If you said to me who's going to hit you 90 RBI, I'd say Rendon. That's the problem there, is that I
Yeah.
feel Rendon is safer for the counting stats. I feel Shaw is going to give you the power. It's just what are you prioritizing at that point in the draft? That's where these conversations around the bottom end of the top 10 get really difficult because it's about how you've built early on. And I know that's really unhelpful, but if you're looking for those extra 5 to potentially 10 home runs, that's when you have to go Shaw.
Yeah.
If you're looking to lock in solid production, you go Rendon.
See, I'd rather take Rendon, be okay with the 18 to 22 home runs, and hopefully get 175, 180 between the runs and RBI, and then knowing my average is going to be closer to 280, 290 at worst case scenario, and then I can always add Joey Gallo or somebody else later and kind of make up the difference in home runs where I guess it would depend too because like we were kind of talked about this with Brian Dozier and Jonathan Scoop and if I took Jonathan Scope, maybe I'm looking at Rendon and saying I want to make sure I lock in that average. Where if I took Dozier, or I guess if I took Jonathan Scope, I'd want to get Travis Shaw and kind of make up that power. But if I took Dozier, then I'd have to make up that average. So it all is kind of fluid, and that's why I think having kind of tiers is a good way to do it. Knowing, okay, I can figure out kind of what makes the most sense at my team for where I'm headed.
Yeah, and I think it was CBS a couple of years ago did this wonderful thing where they took each of the first 12 spots and they said, right, this is the guy that generally goes here and here. And I mean, you can fairly much script the first two rounds. You know, if you've got the sixth pick, you are likely to have a choice between you're likely to get this player in the first round, this player in the second round. And then what they did was they did the next 10 to 15 rounds after that, and they said, right, I would go here, I would go there, I would go here. This is what I need now. That's how you've got to plan your drafts. Is I would almost have two strategies. I would say, right, this is who I think I'm getting at, and this is where it helps if your league manager tells you where you're drafting, because a week before the draft, you can look down your stats and say, right, I'm going to go Arenado, Dink. Then I know I actually by having Arenado, I can go wherever I want. So now I'm going to look at this guy and this guy and this guy, and you can look at ADP and roughly work out who is going to be available to you, and have some contingencies. Build it like imagine it like a family tree kind of thing. Build it, try and build your plan like a family tree and say, right, what happens if I go Miguel Sano here? What do I need in the next round? What happens if I go Anthony Rendon here? Well, what do I need to have done before that to get Anthony Rendon where he's going? That's kind of how I've started to look at drafts now, and it's very hard if you're not. You need to have it ready before you start drafting. That's where the pre-draft preparation comes in, because if you've got all that kind of stuff ready and you're just following down and going, this is working exactly how I planned, you are going to come out of your draft extremely happy. If
Yeah.
you sit in your draft and just start panicking in the fifth or sixth round because you're not sure which way you want to go, that's when things are going to go wrong. And that's kind of what I do in my keeper league each year. I kind of let this, because it starts so early, I let it creep up on me, and then before I know it, I've left myself chasing a stat after 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah.
And so this year I've made a real concerted effort for that not to happen. I've got on my wall in well, not on my wall but on my laptop desktop, I've got the picture where I want to go. I drew it all out at work one lunchtime and took a picture of it and stuck it as my wallpaper. So wherever I am with my laptop or my phone, I can see where I'm going to go. It's very sad, I have to say. My wife thinks I'm insane, but it helps me to know, right. It gets a bit tricky when you're talking pitchers versus hitters. Sometimes that can be a difficult decision, and keeper
Yeah.
leagues are always a little bit bent because things are all out of place. But that's kind of the way I do it, and that this is a prime example of where you need to know what a decision in the fourth round means to who your third baseman in the sixth or seventh round is going to be.
And that's why mock drafts are super critical. If you know, especially if you know I'm going to be in the sixth pick, and this is, I you have stuff. You go do a few mocks and kind of figure out, okay, if I go more power early, am I chasing speed late? Am I going to be able to make that up? Vice versa. If I wait on pitching, what does my team look like? If I grab two studs early, which is kind of where I'm leaning right now. I want to grab pitching early. How does the rest of my hitters look as I go along my draft? Is that something I still want to make sure I lock in? So that mock drafts are going to be key, and I think that kind of helps you be able to react better when something goes different, or when you make a pick and you go, okay, well, I expect this guy to be there. Oh, he's not there. Okay, what do I do now? How do I have a fallback plan? So I think those are all important things. Ben, let's talk about Adrian Beltre. I think is going to be a guy that, yes, he had a very slow, injury plagued first half, but he still hit 300, hit 312, hit almost 20 home runs, 17 RBI or 71 RBIs. This is still a very valuable player, and I think if you get a full season, which, basically 640, 619, 614, 690, 654, what, the 5 years prior, he's been in that conversation of basically playing every game. Do you expect Beltre to just rebound to kind of what we saw over the second half and what we've seen in previous years, or do you think there's real cause for concern with him?
So the first half, second half split is really encouraging in Beltre's case, because of a guy his age, you'd want to see that first half, second half bounce back. And I mean, he wasn't bad in the first half. He just didn't play enough.
Yeah.
For him, he was below par. He 283. He only hit 7 home runs, but he only played 35 games. Only had 127 at bats, 151 plate appearances. So it's always going to be a little bit down, and it's good to see that it all bounced back in the second half. If that was a trend across our season, if we saw a whole kind of season like we saw from Miguel Cabrera last year, I'd be more concerned about him because of his age. But I think he showed at the end of the year that the age isn't the issue. He still plays in a nice hitter's park. I don't see him repeating his 2016 32 home runs, but I also don't see him replicating 2014, 2015, where he only hit 18, 19 because
Yeah.
he hit 17 in just over half a season. I would think somewhere in that range of 23 to 25 home runs. I'm penciling him in for 135 games. I feel like that's not too aggressive, not too defensive. You've got Steamer penciling in for 125 and depth charts for 148. So I'm slap bang in the middle. But I've gone for 135 games, and I think he hits 23 home runs with that 135 games. Depth charts and Steamer, that's the highest they see him hitting is 23. I think he can go over that this year. I think he's got the power still. I think he's got the ability. And I don't see why he can't hit very close to 300 again. Like, that's something that doesn't tend to fall off so much in, like we saw Ortiz manage to do it. So
Yeah.
I think he can keep doing it. I think 290 is what I would almost consider to be a flaw, but I think 300 is more than possible.
Yeah, no, I think like 145-ish games is what I would project. I think I think mid 20s for home runs I think is very reasonable. And if you look at his batting average, 321, 315, 324, 287, 300, 312. This is a guy that I think 300 is pretty much his floor. I think if you get a 290, that's a kind of almost his worst case scenario. And in that season, he hit 18. He only hit 619 plate appearances. It wasn't a very good season for him. But yeah, no, I think 300 is very reasonable with a guy, in mid 20s home runs. And yeah, I think Beltre is another guy. I think it's kind of funny, these older guys that will get written off for like half a season of slumping and people kind of avoid them. And I think they could be nice values going into drafts.
Yeah, and I think third base in general is going to be a nice position of value. I think unless one of those top 5 or 6 really falls into your lap, I don't see that you need to reach. I see that you can just pick off your Longorias, Rendon, Shaws, or Beltres right in that kind of mid range of the draft, mid to late draft, and you'll be perfectly happy with what you've got. And I mean, if Moustakas was signed, or let's say, depending on how you feel about Kyle Seager, your thoughts on Miguel Sano, there is 12 or 13 really good options in there. And if Moustakas signed somewhere nice, there's 14 good options there. So it's a really nice position. And I mean, that's not even including some of the names we're probably going to talk about later in Jake Lamb and Eugenio Suarez. Like, there is lots of options at this position. It's not a position you need to panic at. This is a real position where you can play the tiers, look for the value, take your time, don't get panicked into something. But it's also a position where you can grab someone like Machado early and you get that flexibility. Grab someone like Ramirez early, you get that flexibility. Both of them are going to be more valuable at their other positions, but you've still got that flexibility if the draft falls your way. That's why I like those flexible guys. That's why Bregman's another good shout. But third base is definitely going to be a position I'm going to keep surveying the landscape. It's going to be a position I'm not going to rush. It's a position I'm not going to be forced to panic into. If there's a run on third baseman, just wait. There will be value.
Yeah, let's talk about Devers, and then we'll throw out a few names kind of later in the draft. He's the 12th third baseman. Obviously, flashed a lot last year in his initial MLB season. Is he a guy that you're going to be fine if he kind of ends up where you like him, or is he going to be a guy you're probably avoiding because you're afraid, or do you think there's a lot of upside there, and maybe he's a guy you're reaching on?
No, I don't think he's going to be a guy I own in many places because I think people are going to take him too high for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit harsh on him. I've got him outside of my top outside of my top 20 in my early rankings, and that was just because I hadn't really done my initial kind of breakdown on him. But he's going to come up over guys like Asdrubal Cabrera, who's pretty much losing his job on a daily basis. He's going to come above guys like Chase Headley because I'm worried now Headley's going to lose some playing time.
Well, he's also not very good, so that would make sense.
There is that, but he's going to come up into that kind of 16, 17 kind of range. I do have worry now that Eduardo Nunez is there because I do feel like if he struggles early on, Nunez is going to take his job because Nunez can. And I also worry they're going to rest him regularly because the Red Sox have got ambitions to win the World Series. And I feel like for them to win the World Series, they need to keep that core there. And that means Devers, Benintendi, Betts, Bradley, Pedroia. Nunez. So there's going to be a lot of rotation in there on a daily basis. In weekly leagues, it's going to frustrate you because Nunez is going to play 2 or 3 times a week. It's just whose position he's going to play 4 or 5 times a week. It's just whose position he takes. One day he's going to be in the outfield. Sometimes he's going to be at third base. Might see him slot in at shortstop occasionally if Bogarts needs a break. That's where my problem is with Devers, is that I feel like if he has a slump, Nunez is going to come in and sort of rob that job so they can get him ready for the playoffs. They're not going to overextend the youngster.
So is there a name or two that you're kind of assume? Let's say you missed out on the first, I don't know, 10 to 15 guys, or you grabbed one of them, you put them in. Now you're looking at potentially a corner guy. Is there a guy, a name or two that you're really interested in that if they are sitting there in kind of that second part of the draft, you're going to go out of your way to make sure you lock them up?
If I need power, Kyle Seager comes into the equation.
Yeah, I love Kyle Seager.
Obviously, Joey Gallo and Todd Frazier are kind of, Joey Gallo's not a late power option anymore. Joey Gallo's going quite early, actually, relatively.
Which is weird to me because as somebody who owned him last year, I feel like he was a guy that was sitting on a lot of wires. Like he put up a really nice power production, but his average was so bad that like he wasn't really a useful player. I mean, he hit 40 home runs, but he only had 80 RBIs. He barely hit over 200. Like, why are people all of a sudden talking themselves into Joey Gallo?
I think it's because guys like Odor and him had bad years. And I think everyone's saying Odor is going to bounce back. Odor's not going to hit 210 again. And I think people are just naturally assuming that Gallo's going to do the same. But they're not the same guy. Gallo's never hit for a decent average. That's just not who he is. I mean, he hit 204 in his first 36 games in the big leagues, and everyone just sort of shrugged it off. Well, he played 145 games last year and hit 209. Like, even if he improved, do you really see him getting above 230? And what do you think he's going to do? Hit 50, 60 home runs? I don't see it. But if he does fall late, I can see the power boost, but you've got to have a sound average. I probably would actually rather have, it sounds strange, but at their price, I'd probably rather have Todd Frazier. Just simply because I think he can give you 30 home runs. And I feel like I feel safe in saying 230 is his average, and he'll give me a couple of steals as well. So that sounds crazy, but I think for their value, I'd rather gamble on Todd Frazier.
I think they're both power guys with empty average. I think they're very similar players. And, with Frazier as an average of 210 and rankings and Gallo at 127, what's that, 5 to 10 rounds? Like that makes a ton of sense. I want to throw out a couple more names and then we'll get out of here. The Marwin Gonzalez thing was super useful last year. Obviously, was a solid player. Was able to play a lot of different positions. So between your team and the Astros, they were able to find the ways to kind of have him play a bunch. Is he a guy that you think is still interesting, especially because of that flexibility, or do you think there's too many people there that it's going to be hard for him to get the kind of same games played and plate appearances?
Yeah, I think he's always going to struggle. I think he's going to be a fit kind of guy. I'm not 100% sure site to site where he's eligible, so I'm just trying to pull up his fielding numbers from last year just to see how many games he played at third base. But I've got a feeling, he fell one game short of being eligible to start the year at third base. So he's eligible at shortstop, second base, first base, pretty much everywhere other than third base and outfield. So he's never played a game at catcher. That's disappointing. So the only place he's not eligible is third base. So we should probably say talk about him tomorrow. But I agree with you. At some point in the season,
per Fantasy Pros, he's eligible. So I'm not sure what random site they give him. Yahoo. They let anybody play any position. And then my other guy is Josh Harrison. This is a guy that we've kind of swung back and forth with. He obviously had that year in 2014 that made him really interesting. He's a guy that has 15-ish home run potential. He could be a guy that maybe approaches 2020 with a 280 average. Is he a guy that you're interested in, or is he a guy you think is more closer to the 270 with like 10 and 10?
If we see the Josh Harrison from last year with 15-15 potential, then yes. If we see the Josh Harrison from 2015-2016 with only 4 home runs, I'm not interested. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be just under 10 home runs. I think he'll get up to that 15, 16 steals. It's hard for me to go for him there. Um, One name I just want to finish on is,
Uh-huh.
we're not going to go too deeply into the Miguel Sano situation because there's a pending investigation and it's not worth getting into. But if he's going to be okay to play the full season, you can't project him for a full 160 games because I just don't think his body type fits to playing 160 games. So to be sort of semi-conservative on him, I've gone for 130 games, which fits right in again between depth chart and steamer. I've got him hitting around 30 home runs and a 255 average with about 170 combined runs and RBI. I think that's perfectly fair. I think if he plays and does that, he'll fit right in around the top 10, and it's really going to be tight between him and Eugenio Suarez for that kind of top 10, top 12 kind of position at the end of the season if both of them do everything they can do.
Would you rather have Miguel Sano or Kyle Seager?
Oh, from a talent point of view, it's Sano. I feel like Sano's the guy that can hit you 35 plus at home runs.
Yeah. I think with Kyle Seager, I'd feel a lot safer about not only the games
Yeah.
played, but it feels like the production should be there. I think the home run potential and the RBI potential should be right on line. I think the Mariners. Well, who do you think has a better lineup, the Mariners or the Twins? Because I think it's a reasonable discussion.
I think it's the Mariners, but I think it goes against Seager because I think Sano is the centerpiece to that
Mm.
Twins lineup, whereas I think Seager's the odd man out to an extent because
Yeah.
he's going to be behind Gordon, Segura, Cruz, and Cano for
Yeah.
sure. That's four guys. If Ryan Healy hits well, you could see him jump up in front of him. If Mitch Haniger hits well, you could see him slot in there. So
Now we're getting
you could
crazy. Come on. Come on.
you could see Kyle Seager if everything fits in well and he struggles out the gate hitting seven at the time this year.
Mm.
And if that happens, you're going to see a big dip in those runs and RBI.
Yeah.
You already did last year. He went from 89 and 99 to 72 and 88. That's a big drop.
Yeah.
And his average dropped hugely as well. So I do have concerns about him, and it's always going to be tough if he struggles in that park. That's why I'd rather have Sano. I feel like Sano will always be the centerpiece. Again, that might change if something happens, suspension. However, the safe option is Kyle Seager.
Yeah, I feel like Seager will hit fifth most of the year. I do think there will be a lot of times where either Cano or Cruz, kind of clear the bases, and then Kyle Seager's kind of coming up on his own volition. But it'll be interesting to see for sure. Make sure if you are watching us on YouTube that you are subscribed to this feed, that you are leaving comments where if you have questions for your upcoming drafts, trades, keepers, any of that kind of stuff, throw them in the comments. If you're listening on iTunes, make sure you're subscribed there. Then you get the podcast as soon as it comes out. At 60 feet 6" on Twitter, obviously at Notorious Caro, at Ben Rolfe 15. Send us any questions you have. We're happy to talk about them on the pod, or we'll just hop up in the DMs. We're always down to help you out as fantasy baseball season approaches and throughout the season. But for Ben Rolfe, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.